We are going to look how bank integration works in the Microsoft Dynamics Finance and Operation, and what's required to establish a complete and reliable payment flow between the ERP system, which is Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation, and the bank. I have tried to structure this session to give you both conceptual understanding and practical configuration insights in a case that you're a decision maker, end user, or trying to just finding out how you can just unlocking standard functions in finance and operations. Because basically my approach is that how we can unlock standard functions, which is hidden for the end users. And bank integration classifies as one of the critical process in the end-to-end processes in finance in the ERP systems. And I focus on unlocking this function. I know that most of the users or communities know about the process, but I will try to just give insights what is existed in the standards, or it just give better understanding if they want to customize, if they want to choose a ISV, or if they want to go through the standard process that Microsoft has designed. So from the start and to the end. So Anna has introduced me, so I just covered the deck with a short introduction that I'm Microsoft MVP in ERP and the principal architect in a company named Knowit. So also, I do recommend, if you're just watching this video afterward on the YouTube, to follow me on the LinkedIn, also on the GitHub, and also my webpage on the dyinfotech.com. So I try to just go through in detail on the unlocking standard functions in finance and operations. So basically, today our mission is to start with the end-to-end payment flow and to just talk about how we can unlock or just enable the bank integration in standard finance and operations. So this includes how payments are initiated in finance and operation, how they are processed, exported as files, transferred to the bank, and eventually reconciled back into the system. And understanding this full life cycle is important because bank integration is not just the exporting of files. It's about making sure that the entire chain from initiation to reconciliation work as intended. Basically, I start with the payment end-to-end scenarios, which is completely familiar with the ERP family here, so that we know that the Microsoft has defined the scenarios, end-to-end processes in ERP solutions. And there are three scenarios here, which is applicable to the payment process. The first one is the source to pay, which is in a source to pay scenario. The payment process begins with the supplier onboarding, purchase order execution, and followed by the received goods and invoicing matching. And once it has been validated and also approved, so the finance operation generate the payment proposal and we execute the payment, and then it will process through the bank to complete the payment process. The next scenario here is the or end-to-end process, which is the order to cash. So in an order to cash scenario, the payment lifecycle starts with the customer master data from after the sales order or the invoice has been created, and the invoice issuance has been happened. So customers settle the invoices through the supported payment channel, such as direct bank transfer, card payments, or direct debits. And once the payment has been processed, the finance and operation can import the remittance file from the bank statement or through the direct file. So it will update the account receivable and also the general ledger. The last part here in our portfolios, which is end-to-end process, is record to report, which is the payment are reflected through the integrated posting across sub-ledgers and the general ledger also. So we just call it bank reconciliation. I will go through it in the detail in the next slides. So in order to have a better understanding that how the payment file concepts that through each of these end-to-end processes happen, so we need to go through the standard format that has been designed to work with. It is one of the regulatory alignment. So either it is aligned by the country-specific requirement or the bank. So basically, in the most of the cases, it comes from the bank. So the bank that your company working with, so they have some standards they're working with, and it's also coming from the country-specific requirements. Mostly in the Europe. So we are working with the ISO 222, and it's also getting also broadly used by the other countries. So what is this process has been assigned? So there have some formats. This format has been assigned for creating the file sent to the bank, or import the file from the bank to as a payment status report to direct debit, or to import it as a settlement return or bank statement. So in order to have better understanding on this slide, so I have just provide some technical names and the direction that it has. So it means from or in Dynamics, and also the type. So basically ISO format is XML format, and it's in whole it has contains all of the information that you need to contact the bank. So different banks and market use different file standards here. So here we focus on the ISO because it's one of the most used formats here. So the goal is to understand how Dynamics interact with this standard and how file structures map to business data such as payment, account, references, and also remittance information. So to better have to have a better understanding here, so I just have created a short a flow here. So in the ERP solutions, finance and operation, business central, you name it. So once the file has been generated, so it's sent to the bank. So once the file is getting generated, so we need to create a proposal, then the file validated, and if the file has been okay, so it will send to the bank. After the bank has processed the file, so we just send the receipt return or the just a report to just check it out the file. And based on this, so they just process the payment. Once the payment has been done, so we just send us the count 054. And if it's a debit one, so it's related to the vendor transaction, and it's a credit, so it is based on the customer payments. And at last, they just send it as the bank statement. In some scenarios, so once we send the file to the bank, so the bank will just send the bank statement with a reference from the payments. So to minimize the number of the files that is imported into the ERP solution. So it paves the way of receiving several files, and just concentrating in just one file. So we just call it CAMT 053 extended. But basically in finance and operation part today, so all of these files is accepted and can be imported. So, but basically, if we want to come back, okay, this format exists, but how we can just initiate and start this format? So what is the platform that we can import this configuration? So basically, I just come back to the globalization regulatory, which is the electronic Dynamics 365, let us say, enables organization to import electronic reporting configuration from Dataverse, and to providing access to the continuously updated templates, localization content, regulatory requirement, for example, tax declaration, bank integration, invoicing, and also reporting of the ledger transactions in a specific format. So all of these local requirements or country specific, that is based on the requirements that tax administration or that is must to have in a country, and that an ERP vendor as Microsoft Dynamics 365 needs to deliver per today is delivered via the electronic reporting framework. And in this part, since like bank integration is one of the regulatory report, so in the Dataverse repositories, you can import a specific configuration based on the requirements from the bank. So I have just in the next slide, so share the screen that you can go through the Dataverse. So for example, import the ISO 20022 formats that you need to use in finance and operations. So basically, as a short recap until now, so we have requirement, we need to initiate the bank integration, and we need to find out how in standard can we take that advantage of it. And the first step is through the importing the configurations that needs to use in finance and operations. So basically, before we start the bank setup and initiating this setup in finance and operation, we need to have a better understanding about the bank account and fundamentals here. Accurate bank account information is critical for both for domestic and foreign payments. For domestic transfer, so we know that the bank account number needs to be filled out correctly. But in this deck, so I have just provided the informations that there are some informations that we know that is critical to be accurate. So basically, when it comes to the bank account informations, you need to take it into consideration which countries and what is the requirement that you have. For example, in Norway, so bank account information and IBAN, so you can just use it as identificator when you want to interoperate with the bank. But in some countries, they just classify the domestic and the foreign payments. So the domestic, for example, when it comes to the Denmark, you need to have the FI code, or we just call it FIC codes, or when it comes to the UK, you need to have a source code. And the same also in the Sweden. So you need to have the routing number or the specifications that you can use as a domestic payment. And when it comes to the foreign, so we just know it. So we need to use the international banking account number. We just call it IBAN and SWIFT. So, but what is important here, based on the country-specific bank requirements, so we need to find it out what is the must-fill informations for the bank account in finance and operation, from the cash and bank management, which is the legal entity bank account, to the vendor bank account, and also in somehow a customer bank account. So this information needs to fill out correctly based on these requirements. So if you have legal entities in Norway, so all of your vendors, which is domestic, needs to have the bank account number. And the same also when it comes to the foreign, so you need to have the IBAN and SWIFT. So in order to have better understanding, so I have just to classify these two in domestic and foreign. So you need to just verify this requirement on filling out the bank account information. So take it into the considerations. So this is the prerequisite for the bank payment setup. So basically, when it comes to the payment setup in finance and operations, so if we just take it into consideration, the remittance process. So from the vendor card, we need to have an address, primary address. Why? Because we want to classify, is it from the address, we just classify it, or as it is domestic or foreign, because it will check or match or just compare it with the legal entity address. If it's different, so we just differentiate it and find it as a foreign payments. And also method of the payments that you want to proceed, is it electronic one, is it a manual one, and also to the bank account that we already has covered about the information that needs to be accurate, and also the currency and the name or pay name that you want to proceed. From the legal entity side in the cash and bank management, so we need to fill out all of the information that requires from the banks. So except the bank information, there are some signer IDs, there are some agreement IDs that you need to have with the bank. So you need to fill it out in finance and operation, either as the clearance code or the company ID. So in some countries, for example, in Norway, we need to have a division for some bank as a requirement, or in UK, you need to have the sort code to fill it out. And also in other countries, you may not need the routing number or a specific ID as we just call it signer ID or agreement ID that you need to have with the bank. One of the setup that is recommended, and also you need to check that if the bank account that you have created has been allowed to receive the transaction or process the transaction in other currency that it has been assigned to. So, and also to the bank statements if you are processing the importing the advanced one, so imported directly from the SFTP from the bank, so you can activate it. And also on the setup part, there are some setups that need to be assigned. I do recommend to just check my blog, so I already have just go through all of these steps with the screenshots that you need about the data that you need to fill out, and also the GitHub project. So I already have gone through the record, for example, return format, error codes, and also all of the informations that you need to have for the ISO format. So when it comes to the payment flow, so if we want to start with the payment process in finance operation, basically it starts with the pane 01 or 001. We just call it customer initiate payment file. So this is the file that sends to the bank, and afterward, when the file gets generated, so the status from the payment will be changed from the none to the send. And also afterward, the bank will process the file and respond with the pane 002. We just call it status and acknowledgement, but basically it's just something like a syntax check. So the banks will check the file and just say, okay, it's validated. I can process it as payment. It is just a receipt that the bank will send to just let us know that they can process the file or for the payment. So this is completely important to process this step if you want to make sure that the payment has been added to the queue for the payment. And the last part, once the invoice has been paid, so the bank will send you the CAN 0054, or sometimes they just send you the bank statement as a receipt, as a settlement for the paid invoice. So in order to have a better understanding here, so I just classify it into the out and in. So basically we start with the out now, which is a credit transfer as a pane 001. And the direct debit is basically for some countries that is accepted by the bank and as a special requirement like a Germany. So, but when it comes to the credit debit, is for the vendor, direct debit for the customer. So on the credit transfer initiations, so I just have created some notes here that what is the consequence of the multiple export consequences. So one of the most critical one that if you generate the same credit transfer file, it may create a double payment if the bank doesn't have agreed on some duplication check. So make sure that before you generate the file, so you have already added the correct or let us say accurate workflows to make sure that you avoid the payment, double payment. So basically, in order to have a better understanding, so I have created a scenario. Some days ago, we had some travel expense. So we have we ate pizza. So now we get the invoice from our vendor, and we want to pay it. So if you see in this scenario, so first of all, I just check it out by today, all of the invoices that has been due, so and needs to be paid. So then I will go through to just activate the delete negative payment. So it means that I want just to have the invoices, not the credit notes. And I just choose the currency that I want to pay. And this is basically based on my privilege and workflows that I'm accepted to process. So I just go through the Domino's Pizza invoice that I have been created. So, and it needs to be paid. So I just first put it in the generate the proposal. Once it has been created, the proposal, as you see, the payment status is set to the none. So once I generate the payment, then I choose the method of payment that is associated with the ISO configuration. I just choose a unique file name, choose a bank account that I want to proceed with, and then I go to the next step. The bank account that I have associated here so needs my approval ID, or we just call it the personal identification number. So in the next slide, in the next pop-up message, so it will automatically run the configuration from the report. So I just choose the structure because it's a domestic and the ref to the bank requirement, it needs to be structured. So it means it needs to have the payment ID. And then on the person ID, I just fill out the dummy person ID that needs to be processed because my user has been approved with the bank, so I can just process the payment. So I initiate the payment file, and then the payment file gets generated. And if you see here, once the payment file gets generated, so I can just send it to the loop throughout the integration to be processed. So it will show the file, how it's structured, and also the information that we have from the remittance there. So, and also the payment ID from the invoice that we sent to the bank. And from the payment inflow, so I send the file to the bank has been processed the file. So afterward, bank will send me the payment receipt. So, and I also have just mentioned about the multiple import consequences. So in the case that you import it several times, it just changed the status. So, but when it comes to the settlement for the vendor side, so import not possible if the reference record do not exist. So it is there is a matching with the reference from the bank, and if it doesn't exist in the dynamics, it doesn't have any effect for the double settlement in finance and operations. The most critical one is the customer payment file, the settlement file that we received from the bank. Since we generate the file directly by ourselves, there is possibility that we import the payment file or settlement file as far as we want. So you can just create a double payment, but the first time is match the invoices, but the second time it will go through the unknown account. But you need to make it sure that it hasn't been imported previously. And the last part, which is a bank statement. In the bank statement, there is a duplicate check. So you cannot import the same statement several times. So you will get an error message, or either you cannot import it or it is already settled. So basically, you can just think about it that either to use the bank statement as the vendor payment journal to update or not. So this is the approach. But in the next slide, so as you see, I have already sent the file to the bank. So I received the file from the bank by going to the payment transfer, choosing the same method of payment. And after I have chosen the method of payment, since the file is the PAIN 002, it's just the acknowledgement report. So I just import the file that I received from the bank. And normally these files comes 2 minutes or 1 minute after you send the PAIN 001 to the bank, because just validate the syntax and just send you the receipt. Oh, the file is okay, so we can just process it. And if you see, after I just imported the file, the transaction changed the status to the receipt. So if I go to the next part, so now in this part, the payment has been processed by the bank. And most common, if it's not an urgent payment, so the payment will be take some days to be processed. In this case, so I have, this was an urgent payment. So I received the file from the bank, the payment file. So I just choose to be flow to the another journal. I chose the file, give it a reasonable name, settle the transactions, and also delete the payment, the previous journal that has already been created. And in a case that you have a foreign payment, so do recommend to import the exchange rate to import the exchange rate from the file, not from the system. So as soon as it has been imported, so the file has been changed from the received to approved, and then you can just proceed to post the journal. So this is the process of the flow from the pane 01, pane 002, and count 0D. If we want to do the same process, because since I received the file from the vendor transaction, so I can receive the same also for the customer. So I go through the next part, so that I receive the settlement file from the customer from the bank. So I just first create the journal by myself. So give it a reasonable name for the others to find it out that I'm holding with importing. So in this case, I don't create a proposal because I have received the payment from the customer. So I just choose the method of payment that is associated with the ISO format. And then here, I just activate the settled transaction, import the incorrect records. Why? Because sometimes some of the references that the customer has paid the invoices does not exist in the dynamics. So it's critical that we activate the import incorrect records. So this will be imported in dynamics. So you can just align it with the amount that you have in the file that's aligned with the journal amount, total amount. So it is completely recommended to do that. So I just import the file now. So, and as you see, it will check from the file through the customer open transactions. And in this case, they just find all of the invoices. And if you see here, they just check it out. Okay, there is some warning here that you must read it. And they say for the payment reference, so there is the amount settled is different. It's basically based on, it's a multiple payment. So we just classify it, okay, the amount has been changed. So we just check it out, the warning. So the warning is accepted because it has some information of the bulk payment. And what I do recommend on the payment part tab, just check it out the notes to have a better understanding over the debtor information. And as the last part, payment reference. And if you see the payment status has been changed to received. Here, you need to just check it out, the total amount of the journal to just make it sure that is aligned with the file and customer transaction. As a last part, so we have the file, we know how the file can be generated, we know how we can import the file. So the only things is that how we can interoperate. What is the file exchange and integration scenarios in finance and operations? So basically, most of the bank use the secure transfer approaches, which is the SFTP. So through the private key that they create, so you need to interoperate with SFTP. So for receiving and sending the file. In the standard scenario, so you can use your SharePoint as the receiver or as the file type to send and receive the file in finance and operations. And afterwards, through the Power Platform cloud flows, so you can just send the file and receive and get the file from the SFTP. So this is one of the most used scenarios, basically, for customers. So that's had one company or there's few company in the solutions. When it comes to several companies, so in the finance and operation, I mean the legal entities, so it is also recommended also to have the direct customization with the SFTP connectors or file storage over the usage of the traceability of imported files. So it gave a better traceability. So we can say what has been sent, what hasn't been sent, what is the error message that you got. So, but per today, so there is a standard routine for that through the SharePoint, and you can use the Power Platform to send the file to the bank. So, and also there is the file storage in the electronic reporting state file. So you can just check it out, the file that has been transmitted to the SharePoint. So you can just find it out. But when it comes to the bigger or complex scenario, so you can just evaluate to customize SFTP or connector in finance and operation. But take it into consideration, the whole process, if you see the end-to-end process. So it is also addressed in finance and operation as a standard. So either you want to create the customization or use. So this is just the last part. So as a last connector, so you can just think about. So I think I have have talked a little bit more than I should, but thank you everyone for just joining this community call, and hope that you have get insight about the bank integration and in finance and operation.